All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh here. And folks, we're going to talk about customer data today. Pretty important topic. We're going to talk about CDPs, customer data platforms. They've been around for a long time. It's nothing new, but there are some really interesting innovations happening in that space these days. And one person who knows a lot about that is Adam Greco. He is with a company called Hightouch. He's the evangelist. I love that title. So we'll talk about what those folks are doing and why it matters. And obviously, a CDP, well, you want to have a lot of information on your customers. You want to know what they've bought. You want to know what their preferences are. You want to know where they are. You want to know what kinds of communications they prefer. Some people prefer email. Some people like SMS. Some people don't want to be bothered at all. Some people don't mind getting called now and again. And it's very useful to have all that information at your disposal as a marketer so you can plan accordingly and reach out to the right folks in the right way that they want to be reached out to. And of course, we're hearing all the time these days about AI and personalization and how do you do that? Well, these are all very interesting challenges. This is a fast moving space right now. I will tell you that. The AI infused array of tools that are just popping up left and right are a bit dizzying, but we'll learn a bit about some of that stuff too. So, with that, without further ado, Adam Greco from High Touch, welcome to DM Radio. Tell us a bit about what you folks are working on there and your sort of lean approach of sitting on top of a warehouse, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I'm a product evangelist for Hightouch, and we are really trying to challenge the customer data platform or CDP space by coming up with a whole new approach to CDP. As you mentioned, CDPs are really important for giving the right message, the right customer at the right time. But for many years, what's happened is that organizations have bought a specific platform or a CDP. Sometimes we call this a package CDP, where they take all of their data about their customers and put it into this other platform where it's kind of siloed off and separate from the rest of the customer data.
Hmm.
And our founders worked at a company called Segment that was one of the vendors doing it that way. And they basically said, you know what? Everyone is moving towards the cloud right now, and everyone is putting their data into Google, AWS, Snowflake, Databricks. Why the heck are we putting all this data in another silo? Why don't we just do all the things that people want from a CDP directly on the warehouse? And they coined the phrase composable CDP, which is you can kind of pick which pieces you want. I sometimes think of it as a warehouse native CDP. Some people like to call it a zero copy CDP. So lots of different terms for all the same thing, but it's really shaking up the industry right now.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense because let's face it, data warehouses are an investment. That's where you want to keep your certified, trusted data. You've got data quality algorithms working to make sure that data is high quality, it's vetted, you trust it. And we all know in the information business, if a user doesn't trust the data, they're not going to use the data.
Mhm.
So you have to foster that trust with your users, and the data warehouse is a great place for doing that. And High Touch, your approach is to sit on top of that. If you could get into the weeds a bit, because I think that's a very interesting approach. I think it's very clever because having all sorts of big standalone tools, what does that do? They become silos. Then you have to feed them one to the other. I mean, that's what a data warehouse does. It injects information from all sorts of
Yep.
different systems and then normalizes it, rationalizes it, puts it in a relational model. But if you have lots of large systems, then you got a whole lot of movement back and forth, and that's where all kind of disconnects occur, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the old days, people had internal data warehouses, but all of those are being replaced by these more user-friendly cloud-based data warehouses. But as you can imagine, there's a massive amount of data in there. And if you're just a normal marketer and you want to send an email or you want to do a Google keywords ad, you don't want to have to learn SQL. You don't want to have to like go to someone at your company and say, get me a list of the users that I can market to. You want to be able to do self-service marketing.
Hmm.
So we're trying to bring the best of both worlds to give you an interface that you can build the audiences that you need, maybe identify that these three email addresses are actually the same person, and then take those audiences and send them to an email tool or maybe activate a paid keyword campaign or a Facebook campaign without having to go to IT and file a ticket and wait a couple weeks. And so, yeah, so we just believe that marketers should have self-service. But what's cool about this new approach is that instead of marketers fighting with their data teams, they're actually working with their data teams who've already spent massive amounts of time and money to make sure that the best quality data is in their cloud warehouse. And what's interesting is it's actually bringing these marketers and data and IT teams together instead of getting them into different camps where they start, bickering over whose data is right and so on. And then the last thing that's kind of interesting is you talked about you have to have trusted data. The most trusted data is the one that's been vetted and QA'd, and mostly that's in the warehouse. And especially in a today where privacy is a really big deal, the fewer places that you're storing this sensitive customer data, the better, because it's one less place they can get hacked. And if your customers want to be forgotten based on GDPR or CCPA, instead of having to go and find their data in five different places, you have one place that you can go and remove their data much more easily.
Well, yeah, and you see like I'm sorry, Snowflake, for example, one of the big cloud-based data warehouses, they talk all about zero copy cloning, right? That was one
Yep.
of the big innovations is the concept of a zero copy clone. So you could play around in a sandbox with data without affecting the one source of data, which is in that warehouse, right? So I think Databricks talks about the same thing. This is a pretty common concept. The idea is the data stays, you can manipulate it other ways. And with Hightouch, you're actually sitting on top of it and you can see into it, right? Can you talk about how you can see into the warehouse, the different fields, different
Yep.
data points, for example? And that's what allows marketers or other business people to kind of decide what they want to use from within the warehouse for their marketing purposes.
Exactly. I mean, you can't look at everything because it's massive amounts of data. So the way that a high touch project works is unlike a normal CDP project where you have to do a bunch of coding and tagging and collect data and send it in to a third party tool. What we do is we actually say, give high touch access to your Snowflake or your Databricks, and then let the admin pick which columns and tables you want the marketer to be able to see, and then we build basically a facsimile of your data schema, but
Hmm.
we show it to you in high touch, and it looks like a Sankey diagram that shows all your different models. And basically that's the data that the marketer has access to. And then when they go into our interface and they say, let's say you want to build an audience of people who have been to your website or mobile app more than 3 times, looked at least 3 products, added at least one product to the cart, but
Hmm.
didn't purchase. Well,
Hmm.
you can basically do all this with point and click and then push a button, and it will basically say, oh, there's 550 people that match this audience. Now, what do you want to do with these people? Where do you want to send them? And what's really weird about our product is that we're a customer data platform, but we don't store any data. We actually have no data in our system because we want to just keep the data where it belongs in the warehouse. But anytime we decide to sync it to, say, Google, we're syncing the latest and greatest data in the warehouse right then and there and shipping those users off. Or if you're using, say, Salesforce.com, you might want to update a record, like someone who is single. Maybe you found out on the website that when they filled out a form, they stated that they're married. Well, that could then be pushed to Salesforce so we can keep Salesforce updated by syncing this data. So it's really
Hmm.
an interesting model, but the goal is to make it as user friendly and that you don't have to really go to IT in order to get that kind of help.
Yeah, and the way you've structured this, the compute actually gets done in the warehouse, right? So
Yep.
that's where the compute costs will accrue. It's not inside of high touch, but it's like a push down strategy, right? Like basically you're saying, okay, these are the people we want. Then you push down into Snowflake, it executes the query and then delivers the record detail necessary to the Gmail or email marketing platform or whatever it is you're using, right?
Yeah, exactly. We have integrations with about 300 different packages, whether that's, the ad networks or email, you name it. We have the connectors, and we keep adding more connectors over and over again. And there are some people who worry a little bit about, oh, is this going to raise my compute charges for my data warehouse? But in general, our product is optimized, and we teach our customers to basically say, listen, here's the way you want to use it so that you're not like unnecessarily boosting your compute. But if you think about it, if you buy a traditional or a legacy customer data platform, you are paying for both the storage of the data and the compute. It's just you're paying that vendor. So you're going to pay for compute either way. We
Right.
just feel like this is much more transparent And that's why our pricing for our CDP product can oftentimes be significantly less expensive than a legacy CDP because we're not paying for the storage and because the compute is happening elsewhere. But all of the things that we do in our CDP, whether that's identity resolution or building audiences, we save all of that back into the warehouse so that you can use that in other tools because any tool that hits the warehouse can take advantage of that. And the other benefit of the composable approach in general is that let's say that you're using Hightouch for 2 years, and for some reason, I hope this doesn't happen, but something better comes along. Well, you're not really tied to the vendor because all of your audiences, all of your identity resolution, all of the things you've done are actually stored in the warehouse. So it becomes very easy to swap tools in and out in a composable model. But if any of your listeners here know that if you buy a legacy package CDP, a lot of times you spend 2 years implementing it, and then they own your identity graph. They own
Mhm.
all your audiences. And if you want to move to another CDP product, that could be another 2 to 3 year kind of effort. We just don't believe in that. We think the world is moving too fast to be able to do that. You have to have that kind of flexibility to choose the best vendor that you need. And that goes for all of the other vendors along the way, like whether that's email or advertising as well.
So let's talk about the different functionality that you have inside of there. You talked about being able to see certain columns and tables within the warehouse. So that's something the warehouse team enables, I'm guessing. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually something that the warehouse team works with the marketing team. When you set up High Touch, you're basically just mapping of all of the tables. Maybe you want 80% of them to be available to the marketer. You also can obfuscate things. Maybe you don't want the marketer to be able to see email address or credit card number or social security number. All of that can be set up so that the marketer can only see the things that the data team allows them to see.
Well, and you brought up a really good example, which is who has bought X number of products, who has left an empty cart behind. That's all pretty useful data for marketers. And a lot of
Mhm.
times you have automation set up to ping someone, hey, finish your shopping and don't forget about what you were doing, that kind of thing. What you're doing is enabling that at a very granular level, right?
Exactly. And a lot of things that marketers don't think about is that if you really want to have a good experience with your customer, you need to take into account everything that the customer goes through. And I have a favorite example that I wrote a blog post about, which is imagine someone's on your website and they go to buy something, but for some reason they can't buy it. Maybe there's a problem on your website, or there's a problem with their credit card where maybe just you didn't factor in that they were going to have this type of credit card. One reason or another, they can't buy something. And let's say that that customer files like a support ticket or goes on and complains and says, "Hey, I want to buy something, but you're not letting me."
Hmm.
Well, that's probably in a different tool. Maybe you're using Zendesk or something to track those support tickets. Well, if a marketer doesn't see that information, let's say they're using a legacy CDP that just looks at the website data, they might say, "Hey, here's a person, Adam, who added to cart and didn't purchase. Let's send him an email saying, why didn't you purchase? Can we get you maybe a coupon? Or maybe you start following me around the internet with ads and annoying me because I wanted to buy the product, but I couldn't because of a technical problem." And a lot of times it's too expensive to take all of the customer data, in this case, like the Zendesk data, and put it into a package CDP because that could be really exponentially expensive because they charge by how much data you ingest. But that data is probably already in your warehouse. So in a high touch or a composable CDP, you could actually build an audience that says, "I want people who added a cart, didn't purchase, but I want to exclude people that are having an open support ticket." Or
Oh.
another example might be, what if Adam went and bought that product in a physical store because I wanted to try it on if it's closed or something. I want to take out people who have a support ticket or people who bought it in a physical store. If you send an email without taking into account the store data and the customer support data, then instead of building a better digital customer experience for Adam, you're actually annoying Adam and showing Adam that you don't care about him because you're not really representing his full customer journey. But with this approach, by looking at all the data, you could have a much better experience for your customers.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I'll tell you my experience with all these sorts of HubSpot type technologies where you're trying to build out different workflows and figure out where someone is in the customer journey, it winds up being pretty difficult to do that. Now, AI is coming along to automate even creation of text. For
Mhm.
example, you can have intentions defined and then have the text dynamically generated, which I think gets us a little bit closer, but it's also kind of dangerous because generative
Yep.
AI does make stuff up. So where are you on that spectrum? And what's possible now? Are we moving into a much different world where that personalization is going to be a lot easier, or what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the big areas we've gotten into outside of the Composable CDP. Our first AI product that we launched is called AI Decisioning for that reason. Once we're already have exposure to everything in the cloud warehouse, why don't we have AI determine what is the message that every person should get? Because you can't treat, if you have 10,000 customers, you shouldn't treat them all the same. They all have different needs and wants.
Right,
So
right.
what we're doing is basically allowing a marketer to come up with a bunch of subject lines, creative images, because as you said, we don't want it to hallucinate. We right now we're not 100% confident that AI is going to create the right image. So we're letting you can use generative AI to make images, but once you approve them, you put them into our system. And what we do is we will then send whether it's an email or a push message on site or even an ad, we will customize that so every user sees something different and we'll try different things, different subject lines, different images for like maybe
Hmm.
10% of the users. And then very
Oh,
quickly, the AI learns what's working and what's not working. And it eventually kind of builds up a profile for each user. Like it might know that
wow.
Adam only opens up messages in the morning. He must
Right.
be a morning person. Some people, like my son, is a night owl. He'll probably only open messages at 2 a.m. So we customize that and we've seen like 20, 30% lift in both opens and conversions for personalized messages. And the cool part with digital, you could have a holdout group. So we automatically have a holdout group so we can prove that the AI is actually working versus the control group,
Interesting.
which is really, really cool.
Wow. That is cool. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff we've been talking about for years, and there are some forward-looking companies who figured it out a number of years ago. I've talked to some of them, but again, it does get pretty sticky when you get into the weeds. However, with an AI layer, you can, as you suggest, start monitoring that stuff, and that is really, really good information and really good functionality to get to the right people at the right time with the right message. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We're talking to Adam Greco of Hightouch. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, talking to Adam Greco of Hightouch. It is a CDP platform, customer data platform. They're doing some very interesting things. And Adam, as I mentioned, we've talked about doing these things for years. I'm talking for 20 years now. I remember in the year 2001, it's 24 years ago, talking about BI for the masses, business intelligence for the masses, democratizing data access, things of this nature.
Customer
Back
360, customer 360.
Right, of course, like understanding everything about the customer. And, these days you really can build out profiles on especially high value customers, for example. I'm guessing that's one thing that you've seen in your career is organizations figuring out, hey, these are the customers who make us the most money. Let's make extra sure we take care of them because they're taking care of us with our top line and even in our bottom line. So that's possible. It's kind of hard. It's maybe not cost effective to build a profile on every person, but you can also have cohorts and understand, okay, this group likes this kind of stuff, this group likes that kind of stuff. That's what a person in your role or the person who uses high touch, that's what they're doing all day, right? Is trying to figure out what sort of segmentations do we want? What should those rules look like? And then pull the trigger and do stuff. And I'm guessing that in high touch, you can track these things over time. So you can see, you mentioned you've seen 20, 30% lift in open rates and conversions. That's a lot of lift. 20% is pretty darn impressive. And it's because you're getting the right message to the right person at the right time. Isn't that right?
Exactly. And I think in order to do that, it's easier said than done. You have to have that full customer data set. So if you're only looking at parts of it, it becomes really difficult. So for example, one of the cool things that our customers do is they use a feature of our product called traits. And if you think of what a trait is, it's almost like a calculated data point for your customers. So, for example, a really easy example would be lifetime value. Like
Hmm.
if you're using, say, a Google Analytics and someone hit your website, wouldn't you want to know right then and there, the person on the website, how much have they spent with you over the last 5 years? Well, that's really difficult to do because in order to do that, Google would have to like somehow hit a back end in real time, get all that information and so on. But because we have access to the warehouse, we can build what's called a trait that says, I'm looking at a metric called order revenue, and I want to look in the warehouse, which can go back for years, not just like, 24 months like some companies do, and just look at all of that history and say, Adam's lifetime value is $5,000. And then we can have that cached basically ready so that if we see Adam on the website, boom, we know that he is in kind of the high value group. So let's offer him something interesting. Like I fly a lot on United Airlines and they take care of me when I'm on the plane, but they don't often take care of me as well as when I'm on the website. I would love to have a really catered experience on the website. Like, Adam, thank you for flying over 1 million miles on United Airlines. Here's a cool thing that we can do for you or something we could offer you. So I think that's a cool way of using all of that data in the warehouse with a CDP to deliver a much better experience. And so building these cohorts is really powerful. And you're not looking for one person, you're looking for groups of people. And one of the crazy things that we're building right now, and this is based on the AI trend, is you can now go into Hightouch and basically just type in a phrase like, I'm looking for people who have done this but haven't done that,
Hmm.
and then AI will
Wow.
basically build the
Wow.
structure of the audience and say, here's the audience. And instead of you even having to do the drag and drop to filter, instead of choosing city and then drop down equals Chicago, you could just say, I'm looking for people in Chicago that have spent over $5,000 lifetime. And it'll boom, it'll just give it to you and say, now what do you want to do? What do you want to tweak it? Where do you want to send these users? And that's kind of the crazy part.
Well, see that's getting very, very interesting. And I think what we're witnessing right now is a massive transformation of this industry because hitherto you had to know how to speak to databases. So you had to know SQL, for example, or
Mhm.
maybe in the data science world, there's a lot of Python, there's a lot of R, but these are programming languages, and you'd have to understand the programming language and work with tools that are, not tremendously intuitive to use. But not anymore. If you could just ask natural language queries, and even that's not terribly new. I'm old enough to remember Progress Easy Ask, where you would ask it a
Yep.
question and it would give you the SQL query that spun off to become a different company. I think they're focused on retail these days for obvious reasons. But the point is, this is now becoming mainstream because you can leverage large language models. You can leverage all sorts of natural language processing and to allow the user just have free interaction with large data sets with natural language. To me, that is about as big an uplift as we're going to see in this industry. What do you think?
Exactly. And the cool part is it's your data and it's not publicly available. So this isn't ChatGPT. So you can ask a question of your data. And what's cool is it's conversational like Perplexity. So that if it comes back and it says, oh, there's 500 people, you could say, what if I broke that down by city? And then boom, it will show you these people by city. And you could just keep asking these questions until you get the answer. And then finally you say, there's 100 people. I want to do an ad campaign. And the coolest part is being able to then come up with campaign ideas,
Right.
asking our system
Right.
to say, based on everything you've seen in the past, what would be the right channel to go after these 200, 300 people? And it might
Right.
say, these people, you should do paid search because we're seeing that these people always respond to paid search. These people, you should do email. And imagine our system, and this is what we're working on right now, is automatically creating a journey map that says, okay, for this audience of users, we're going to split them into 4 groups. This group gets email, this group gets paid search, this group gets a display ad, this group gets an SMS. And then after they get that message, we're going to wait 7 days. And if nothing happens, then we're going to do this other thing and then kind of bring them back together and put them into maybe just a normal email drip campaign or something. And maybe the next step is if they come back to the website or mobile app, we're going to show them this personalized ad that is based on the same email we sent them. So building these journeys without having to do SQL or spend hours mapping out all these crazy flows and just
Right.
describing what you want. And the cool part is that what I love about AI is it's moving us from tactics to outcomes. Is you could
Mhm.
describe to Hightouch what is the outcome that you want, and now it's going to use AI to figure out how you get to that outcome. And it's almost like you become a coach
Hmm.
instead of a player. And you
Mhm.
start using these agents to do the work for you. And they can just crank through and they give you these ideas that you never would have ever thought of. And in a little bit, I want to share a couple examples of some of these ideas that blew us away that we didn't, like a human would never have figured out.
Well, so I mean, you're bringing up a lot of really good points here, and it's very exciting because, as you suggest, you can just start asking questions, and the AI, especially with enough context, can do absolutely amazing things. I mean, we're going to do a show on Monday with the former CTO of Software AG, and it was German company, of course. They had a bunch of different products, and he left, and now is part of Everest ERP. And he showed me a demo that absolutely blew my freaking mind. And he made a really good point that you just kind of touched on. One of the things he said, like it's like a sandbox for ERP. So typically, ERP, they don't want to change anything, right? If it's the
Yeah,
ERP, like leave it alone, don't touch it. Like it's working, just be quiet. Don't stay away from us, right? Now you can make all kinds of changes. And what he suggested is they were able to do some Google searches, and they found some products that were similar to what this particular client wanted. And within an hour, they were able to just walk through what they wanted. They built out the specs for this thing once they had the requirements just from natural language, and the specs were incredibly detailed. And what
yeah,
Stefan mentioned to me, he said, no human can write specs that good. You're just not going to be able to do it. It takes
yeah.
too much time. It's painful. It's just difficult to do. But these new machines can. And so, to your point, again, if you have enough rich data, enough customer data to leverage, you can ask these tools all kinds of interesting things, and they will not only give you interesting answers, they'll give you very detailed steps to take in order to achieve something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why we feel so well positioned. The whole composable CDP is having a moment
Hmm.
because what do we have access to? Two really important things. We see all of the customer data that a company has, and we have connections to all of the tools that they use to interact with those customers. So the only thing we're missing is speeding it up and expanding on that with AI. So once you
Hmm.
throw AI in the mix, now AI is looking at all of the customer data, can make really good decisions, and
That's
then
crazy.
activate those. And so that's kind of what's why I think the CDP space is having kind of a renaissance right now.
Hmm.
And I think one example I'll give you that shows just the power of this is I won't say the brand, but we had an exercise company that was a client of ours. And let's just say that they were trying to sell a cross-sell product.
Hmm.
And they knew that people were swimmers. They have a lot of swimmers as customers, but they wanted to cross-sell other products for other sports. So they used our AI decisioning product and they basically tested out creative for all of their other different product categories.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
the AI within a day came back and said, you know what? There's something going on here. It had a grid and it showed like the correlations. It said there's something about martial arts products that are really resonating with these people who were swimmers. And like a human would be like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what does martial arts have to do with swimming? Well, the company actually did some research and talked to some of these customers, and they didn't know this, but they found out that if you do martial arts, it's really taxing on your body. And one of the best ways to recover is to swim.
Hmm.
Or if you want to prepare for martial arts, the muscles you build when you're swimming really help with martial arts. They actually didn't know about that connection, but the
Wow.
AI found it. And that now opened up a whole new opportunity for cross sell and marketing campaigns.
Well, and here's the other really, really cool thing about this kind of technology and this capability. To your point earlier, you said that you can set up a campaign. And of course, everyone knows what A/B testing is in the marketing
Mhm.
world. You can have ABC testing, ABCD testing. There are lots of different ways you can do things. But and the magic has always been, all right, send out a sampling and see what the traction is. See, what's the distribution curve. See if there's one standout or if they're all kind of equal. I mean, I can tell you I've done lots of A/B testing on our lists, and it's always about equal. So I don't know
Yeah.
what that means for us, but we have a pretty stable list, I guess. But the point is, you can, with that sample size, you can figure out, okay, this one's really working, and then shift the rest of your push to that lane because now you
Yeah.
see, right? And you never know for sure, but what you're doing is greatly increasing your chances of success, right?
Yeah, and that's really becoming more important because, as you know, marketing attribution in the past has been based on UTM codes and
Mm-hmm.
cookies, and all of that's kind of going away with ad blockers and browsers are blocking stuff. So now doing these split tests are really important. And so that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things we've added to our product is you could take any audience and split it into X number of audiences, do different campaigns, different treatments, and then we will show you which ones are doing better. And we put statistical significance in it. So we tell you when you've had that
Mm-hmm.
experiment going
Oh,
long enough
wow.
to know that you can actually trust the result. And
Wow.
then once you see that one is winning, you're literally one button away from just saying, show this to everyone. And that could be,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a large population, that could be a couple hours. If you have a smaller population, it may take a couple days.
Hmm. Well, and the key here too is that you learn from success and failure, right? So you learn what works and you see what doesn't work. And I've been marketing long enough to know sometimes you think you've got the best idea ever and it just does not work. Or you think, well, this idea might be great. Let's try it. And bam, it like blows up. I mean, some things do actually go viral. A lot
Yeah.
of times it's just because people paid. But there are some things that do go viral. And the key is that you want to be able to learn from everything. And a system like this that you're providing can capture a lot of those learnings over time such that you
Yep.
don't lose them because that was part of the problem is that you learn something but then it's just in your head and it's
Yep.
difficult for someone else to find. But if this is in a layer of abstraction that has captured these learnings over time, that's very valuable. And you'll see drift over time. You'll see things not work as well. It's when you switch models, for example. But still, the key is that you're capturing this knowledge gain such that future
Yep.
workers can benefit from it as well, right?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, which is why it's interesting that the company that does CDP is now moving into the AI area because these learnings, we store them back into the warehouse so that they can then be used in future audiences for the CDP. So it's kind of this like virtuous cycle that
Mm,
happens is you do experiments, you learn something that gets stored in the warehouse, which then helps you build better audiences, which then helps you build better future experiments and so on. So it just keeps getting better and better. And that's why everyone is jumping on the AI bandwagon lately. But a lot of people were interested in how a composable CDP company like Hightouch was moving from CDP, but also adding these AI and agentic AI products.
mm-hmm.
We believe that there's a synergy there. But if you're using a legacy CDP, like the odds of you getting those learnings back into that data silo is pretty slim. And
Right.
so they may get lost. But we believe once it's in the warehouse, then there's so many other systems that touch the warehouse that could use it. You may have an email tool that is working off the warehouse, and you might build an audience in the email tool that says, I want people that liked, one of these two treatments from an
Right.
experiment that had
Right.
nothing to do with email. It was an experiment
Right.
on the website, but now
That's
that
right.
email tool could take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so, to your point, information architecture matters, folks. It still does matter. Composable is a very hot topic now, I think, because of the reasons that Adam is describing. But, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio talking with Adam Greco, evangelist for Hightouch. We're talking about customer data platforms and personalized marketing, optimized marketing. The old shotgun tactic of just spraying your emails everywhere and hoping someone cares. That's dying by the day. I know from experience, I've been doing tracked email marketing for 25 years and things have changed. But the key is signal to noise ratio. The tighter your signal, the more in tune you are with what your users want to hear about, the better off you're going to be. Your open rates will stay high. Click through rates, maybe not as high as you want, but people are paying attention. And I'll tell you, I'll put it this way, Adam. The one I worry the most about is the unsubscribe. When I see unsubscribe, I'm like, oh, what did I do wrong? I get all upset about that. Like, another one bites the dust. But our unsubscribe rates lately have been crazy low. Like we sent an email out to 33,000 people, had two unsubscribes. That's pretty good. For a long time, we had about 1 per 1,000, so if it's 10,000, we get 10 unsubscribes. Getting it 2 unsubscribes from 30,000 is kind of impressive. Like, that's a pretty good number. But I did wanna kinda dig in a little bit to talk to you about who you're competing against, because there are the Goliaths, there are the Salesforces of the world, there are the Adobes of the world. Typically, they're so big that they don't move very fast, and even if they can sort of inject like thunder and lightning, which was Salesforce's move a few years ago, it takes a while. And so the smaller vendors do tend to be more agile and can address specific customer needs more efficiently. But what are your thoughts on that whole game and kind of where things are going?
Yeah, it is tricky. And if those of your listeners are familiar with the innovator's dilemma, it goes over and over where when I worked at Omniture, which was then acquired by Adobe, we were the new entrant, and WebTrends was the biggest analytics vendor. And
Hmm.
then now, 20 years later, Omniture became Adobe Analytics. They're the 800-pound gorilla, and there's newer companies going after them. So that cycle always repeats. But I think that what we found is that the world is moving so fast right now, and digital experiences are overtaking in-person experiences, that
Hmm.
you have to be able to move fast and you have to be able to innovate, and AI has just put fuel on top of the fire. But I think some of these bigger vendors, like they have a lot of employees, a lot of management layers, and it just takes a lot of to get things through innovation. And one of the things that I find is that, if you're ever familiar with the expression lipstick on a pig, I don't want
Hmm.
to call anyone a pig, but
Right.
it's just the phrase. But I think that in many cases, a lot of these bigger vendors are using AI as a veneer to paint over older technology, the technology that's been
Hmm.
around for 10 or 20 years that hasn't really changed underneath the hood, but they're just kind of putting a nice AI spin on it. And that'll
Hmm.
last for a little while. But I think ultimately, once you're actually buying software and using it, like, you need the most advanced technology. And so, as a semi disruptor in the space, like, we're pretty small and we can move really, really quickly. And we just add features at a pace that bigger vendors just can't keep up. And I think that's healthy for the industry and it's healthy for customers. And I think the more we push on that envelope, the more it forces some of the bigger giants to adapt. But honestly, I do feel a little bad for some of the bigger vendors. I mean, they have huge advantages of being the incumbent, and their customers are using lots of products. So adding one more isn't that big of a deal, but it is really difficult for them to come over to, say, the composable approach, because that means almost like throwing away years of work and starting over, and then convincing all their customers that what they told them to buy a couple of years ago was wrong. Just
Hmm.
buy this new thing. Oh, and
Right.
by the way, we have to figure out a new pricing model to charge you, because that's different. And so I think it's an unenviable task, but I think eventually they're going to have to figure out a way to get there, or they're going to have to convince customers that what they're seeing in the world is not really true, and that composable isn't the big thing. But so far, most of the industry is realizing that composable and being warehouse native is the next big thing.
Yeah, and here I'll throw a bit of a curveball at you and just see what you think about this. One of the real challenges these days, and it's always been a challenge, but I think it's more of a challenge lately, is understanding what's a bot and what's not. In terms of clicks, for example, or opens, or any number of metrics that you get. I mean, if you look at YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I've bought advertising for most of these different solutions, and I've kind of played around with it to see what's going on. And the whole impressions thing is like, really? Are you sure I have that many impressions? Are those actual people? Where are we on that journey right now? Are we getting better, or is it just that it's very difficult to ascertain what's real and what's not?
Yeah, I think it's getting worse, and I think it's going to continue to get worse. So we talked about, say, UTM codes; those are
Hmm.
getting blocked very easily. You mentioned your email unsubscribes, and I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but I actually think the reason you're not seeing that many email unsubscribes is because there's new tools out there where people are unsubscribing and you don't even know about it. So, for example, I use personally a special email tool called
Hmm.
Hey.com, and
Hmm.
what Hey.com does is it allows you to screen people coming in. And if I don't want to hear from that person, or let's say I want to unsubscribe from a newsletter, I just push a button that says, I don't want that anymore. Now, you
Hmm.
would never know that I unsubscribed, but I'm not seeing it. And that now is moving into Gmail. I heard they're going to be doing that in Gmail as well. And I think with paid search and SEO, we're starting to see that now AI is impacting search. And so you might get the answer from an AI on the very first page and you don't click on those links. And so,
Right.
what's the benefit of that? Right now, ChatGPT is still using Google search, so there's still reasons to do that. But once people are using the ChatGPT and the Perplexity browser, and if they start crawling information, then I wonder what's going to happen with some of these marketing channels. I think email is slowly, running into problems. I think you're going to see SEO and paid search and display ads have problems. And so that's why I think, as we talked about earlier, I think it's going to really come down to these split tests. And some people call that incrementality as a way of really seeing what's working when it comes to marketing.
Hmm. Interesting. So for the one you're talking about, this Hey app, I mean, would opens still register then? So
Nope.
okay,
All of it
well,
is blocked. Every time I get an email from Hey, it has a message at the top. It says, "This person is trying to track you to see if you opened up this email. We blocked it."
hmm
It
hmm
blocks all of that. And I think pretty soon all of the email tools are going to have that.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, that's a difficult thing to do. So our open rates are still great. I mean, they're like 50% on that one for 30,000. So I do know this stuff is out there. I mean, email, if you follow from where it leaves to where it
Yeah.
goes, oh my goodness, the amount of steps that it takes is kind of mind blowing. And you think
Yeah.
about the amount of compute being leveraged to make all that stuff happen. It's a very interesting dynamic these days. And point being, a composable customer data platform is going to give you the ability to look at all sorts of different things. I mean, there are overall trends in the marketplace. I mean, I saw, I guess it's about 2 years ago now, Gmail did some big push on clamping down on just email blasts, basically. So you saw a little bit of pushback then. We were able to navigate around that just by getting more and more careful about who we email and what time and so on and so forth to keep that number up. But that's what you have to do. In order to do that effectively, you need analysis, right? And that's the
Yeah, you
point of
need
having a
signals.
CDP.
You need signals. And nowadays, if you don't meet with customers face to face, the only way you can listen to them, I mean, the truth is we always have to listen to customers. And now we just have to learn a new way to listen to them. And the way we listen is through clicks and swipes. And we hope that as much of it doesn't get blocked as possible. And
Right.
all of that data is now going into the warehouse. And here's the worst part is so much information about your customers is trapped in that warehouse. Like if your warehouse could like scream at you and tell you like, here's customers that want to buy your product. Here's customers that are really mad at you right now. And so what we're trying to figure out is how do we tap into that warehouse to help you understand what your customers are trying to tell you? And a lot of times that's done through building these audiences. But in the future, I envision a world where composable CDP like Hightouch is going to use AI, and you're going to wake up in the morning and it's going to just tell you, by the way, while you were sleeping, here are 20 things that we learned about your customers based on yesterday's data that you should know about.
Mm,
These people you should reach out to right away because they're ready to buy. These people are checking out your product. And in general, we see that after they check out your product, most buy in 30 days. So you should ping them in 30 days. That's the optimal time. And
mm,
as you mentioned earlier, data science teams have built these really complex models for like what's the next best product, next best category. Well, all of those models run on the data in the warehouse. And so
hmm
with the composable CDP, you could take advantage of those models, build those into traits, and then build them into audiences and take advantage of all the hard work your data science team is doing on the warehouse.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting journey going forward. There are always attempts to block things, but there are always workarounds to deal with that. And we see this time and time again. Look at pop-ups, right? Pop-ups went away like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, no more pop-ups. And what happened? Pop-ups. Everyone's got pop-ups these days. So it's like what goes around comes around. But the key definitely is data and analyzing your data. Well, folks, podcast bonus segment is coming up next. We'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on DM Radio. Talking to Adam Greco, evangelist for Hightouch, a composable customer data platform. And Adam, one of the things I think that's going to happen here, and you're seeing it already with layoffs at these big tech companies, we're talking layoffs in the thousands, even in the tens of thousands. This is a major shift that's going on. The theory is that AI is going to do a lot of these jobs. I think a lot of the companies that are really banking on that are going to learn some hard lessons in the fairly near future, that you still need people to manage these things and you have to be careful about what you allow agents to do. But one thing I'm pretty sure is going to happen is we're going to have a bit of a flattening of the organizational hierarchies, and you're going to have sales and marketing people coming together a bit more. Sometimes the sales folks are going to have to learn more about marketing, and marketing learn more about sales. And these are two groups that have long been at loggerheads. Sales typically says, give me more leads. Marketing says, do more with the leads I gave you. And that kind of goes back and forth. But I do think that you're going to start to see people picking up more than just their old tasks, more than just their old things to do every day, because organizations are going to get smaller and they're going to have to get smarter about how they work. But like, how do you see high touch facilitating coordination between sales and marketing so you don't have these silos?
Yeah, I think sales and marketing have always, especially in B2B, have always been at loggerheads. I actually think that that's gotten a little bit better over the last couple of years because sales and marketing understand what the other is trying to do. You know, one is just trying to kind of build that pipeline for B2B, and the other is trying to close that pipeline.
Right.
But I think the bigger change that we're going to see is really between the combination of sales and marketing and like the data and IT teams,
Mm,
because like it's really apparent to some customers when they get messages from a company that like one division sent them an email, but another division just sent them another email, because like it'll be like different messages, different themes. But I think what we're starting to see with the composable CDP is that the marketing and data teams are starting to work together because for the first time ever, they're using the same data set. And the marketers are realizing, hey, if we're going to really do audiences and do messages on the data in the warehouse, we need to make sure the data is accurate and that it's good. And the data team is saying, listen, we're working really hard to make the data good about our customers, but we need to understand how are you going to use it and what data do you need in order to do your marketing efforts. And I think in some weird way, the old traditional CDP kind of kick this problem down the road because the marketer could go and grab their own little system that they could control. And all they
hmm
had to do is basically work with a third party vendor to get the data into that CDP. But as we mentioned earlier, that doesn't have all the data. We don't know how trustworthy that data is. But now that everyone is using the same data set, it causes a little friction here and there. But I think in the long run, that's where we need to be so that the data and marketing teams and the sales teams are all, dancing from the same sheet. And that's really, I think, what's going to change the future. And I think that these silos are slowly breaking down because the technology is getting much easier. Like, for example, imagine you're a marketer 5 years ago and you're building an audience, but you're building it on a package CDP and you have like a field called, favorite product or last web page visited, but the data team knows nothing about that. But now, if all of that is in the warehouse and you're building your audience directly off the data in the warehouse, well, now that forces a conversation between the marketing team and the data team to say, hey, I need to have web page names in here. I need to have the favorite product in here. How are you helping me to build the audiences that I need? And those audiences are there then forever in the warehouse, not in some third party tool. So I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. But I think in the long run, this flattening is going to be great for marketers and the data teams, and for organizations and ultimately for customers. And I think the last thing I'll say on this topic is like, you want to have your customer at the center of everything. And the truth is, customers don't care about department A, department B. They don't care about the
Right.
marketing and sales and the data department. They just want you to give them a holistic experience. And this is the only way I know of for customers to get a cohesive, holistic experiences off of one data set and having all these teams working together.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'll throw just one last little observation at you and get your thoughts on it. About 2 minutes left here in the show. I think these large language models are going to serve as the ultimate equalizers in many ways. And in part because you can give access to trusted data, of course, to these, maybe through a model context protocol layer, for example, maybe through a knowledge graph. That's a very sophisticated way to do these things. But when you can ping all these different systems with a natural language query, all of a sudden that gets very interesting. I mean, I'm talking to people who have systems designed, you don't even need a warehouse. It uses agents to go into your Salesforce and your CRM and your other stuff to come back and get answers. I mean, there are lots of ways to skin the cat. But my point is that these large language models, as language enablers, are really opening up the whole possibility here of finding interesting answers from your data. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, MCP is really exciting. My son is actually focusing his whole career on MCP. He's like an
Wow.
MCP programmer. And to me, it blows me away some of the stuff he tells me. And he was telling me that, like, in the future, a website, may not even be like a website that we think of that has a UI for a human. It might be a UI that is customized so an MCP can get the information it needs quickly. Or it might have two. There's the human interface and then there's the MCP interface. But I
Right.
agree. I think right now we're going to see a lot of chaos around this MCP and pinging all these systems. But I think ultimately customers are going to realize that this MCP needs to ping that central data source. And I think that most people are going to just keep shoving more and more into the warehouse and then just be amazed by what AI and MCP is able to pull out for them out of that warehouse. So it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, I think it really is. We've almost turned the world inside out here, which is kind of exciting because now you can see into your data. But this does get back to one of my common themes, which is folks, get your data house in order. Like, pay
Yeah.
attention. And there are tools to do that too. You can scan your entire information landscape these days and get some really good intelligence on what information you're using, what information you're not using, where there are data quality problems, where there aren't data quality problems. That whole stochastic side of assessing what's out there in your environment is getting very mature as well. And I think it's going to lead to some really good times, but you got to keep your chops up, folks. It's things are moving
Yeah,
very
AI
quickly.
is like a magnifying glass on your
Yes.
data. So you might be
Yes.
scared what you see. So you got to make sure you have really good data because it's going to just magnify it.
That's true. That's a great closing comment. Well, look this gentleman up online, Adam Greco, Greco of Hightouch. We'll talk to you next time, folks. You've been listening to DM Radio.